box. And I look and there's a little box on a tree. So I said, okay, and I dug out a quarter. This was in 1969. Put it in, and she said, okay, now you can come in. Came in, looked around at her museum, which, I don't know, anybody here ever been to Chinook Kennels? I know that there's a tour there now. They were trying to do it, refurbish it. But, 34 years ago, 35 years ago, it was pretty different. Saw what she had, but, it changed my life. Changed my entire life. There went my clothes, my house, everything. For the next, everything that I've learned from her has changed me so much. The Malamute are now owned by the breed. The breed is much more important to me than any one dog, than anything I could ever do. And, this is basically how I've gotten involved in Alaskan Malamutes. And so for 10 years, I went out there, I cleaned kennel runs, fixed fences, did anything that I was ordered to do. And it was very, very interesting, and I certainly thank her very much for it. Mrs. Seeley, Eva and Milton Seeley, got married in the 1920s. I think she liked me because I was probably one of the few people who was almost as short as she was. Maybe that's why they called her short. Also, we went to the same college. We both went to Boston University at different times. Okay? She's a very good judge of character, this lady. It's funny. I remember when she sold me my first dog in 1969, she didn't like my first husband. And she said, I don't want his name on this dog. That was the only way I could get a dog from Mrs. Seeley, was by having only my name on that dog. You know what? 8 years later, boy, was she right. Okay? Really, it was such a good thing that I didn't have to fight him for custody of my foundation bitch, Kotzebue Mickey of Chinook. Anyway, the Seeleys were on their honeymoon. They went to Lake Placid. They met the famous dog driver, Arthur Walden. And they were just totally enamored by the breed. Milton was a chemist. They never went back. When Arthur Walden went to Antarctica, they stayed. They took care of his kennel. They trained the sled dogs there. There were many different types of dogs. There were Alaskans, there were Siberians, there was a breed called the Chinook, which was actually similar to a more of a mastiff type of a mastiff lab cross type of a dog. And there was also this wonderful breed that Mrs. Seeley fell in love with. It was called the Alaskan Malamute, named after the Malamute tribe, which was an Inuit tribe. She went to Alaska. She brought these dogs back with her. She bred them clear for 6 generations. And in 1935 was the person solely responsible for the registration of the Alaskan Malamute. Mrs. Seeley also founded the Alaskan Malamute Club of America, was one of the founders, the founder of the Yankee Alaskan Malamute Club, one of the founders of the Siberian Husky Club of America, and the Yankee Siberian Husky Club. She was one of the collaborators in the standard for the Siberian Husky in 1933. And when she wrote the Malamute standard in 1935, this is what she told me, that she intended with the original standard, she wanted the Malamute to be compared to the Siberian. So we had many, many, many references originally to the other northern breeds. And the other northern breed was the Siberian Husky, because that was what she knew. So when you look at our standard and you say, you look at the Malamute, you say the Malamute is a heavy-sledging, fighting dog of the north. You need to think of that in comparison to the Siberian, not in a vacuum. You know, it's not a St. Bernard. A St. Bernard couldn't do the job that he was intended to do. So that's really important. When we talk about the Malamute, as far as being the dog, the endurance dog, the trading dog that carries a heavy load over a long distance, over a long period of time, we need to think of him as comparing him with a Siberian. That is also an endurance animal, but carries a light load over a long distance. And of course, it's going to be lighter on his feet. Okay, so you need to think of it in that framework. When I think of the Malamute, you know, what is the essence of the breed? Everybody says, you go to these seminars, you say to people, you know, what makes your breed different? You know, why is your breed different than mine? A Malamute, you know, when I think of it, I think of intelligent, proud, inquisitive, beautiful, standing high up on his pads. We talk about a beautiful neck. We talk about a lovely plumed tail. And I think that's something that we're losing in the breed a little bit too. We want this lovely plumed tail. You know, there's nothing more beautiful than a row of Alaskan Malamutes all standing there, all wagging their tails, just kind of looking around, always eager, always interested. And that's what we're looking for in our breed. That's the essence of our breed. We talk about priorities, and this is very important. In my opinion, we have a very good standard. Our standard prioritizes. The animal's function is really what we are looking for. Okay? This is very important. The Alaskan Malamute must be able to survive and to work in the primitive environment for which he was intended. And I'm going to repeat that. The Alaskan Malamute must be able to survive. Right, Nancy? And he must be able to work in the primitive environment for which he was intended. Think about it. And Nancy's going to go into the survival characteristics into much more detail than I am, obviously. But, you know, what does he need? He needs a good coat. He needs a coat that that will enable him to do the job that he was intended to do. He needs good feet. Feet have got to be a top priority in this breed. Okay? Mushers say if you don't have good feet, you can't work. Right? He needs a good, big, thick, tight foot. He needs to be in good condition. These are attributes that we need, attributes that will enable him to survive. He needs to be sound. Not a little pretty dog. I mean, it's a beautiful dog, but he's got to be able to do that job. That is extremely, extremely important for us. I have, excuse me, look at this picture right here. You know, I go to seminars all the time. It's kind of interesting. You go to a Rottweiler seminar, go to a Doberman seminar, and they'll say to you, this is the Doberman of the 20s, and here it is. This is the Doberman of the 30s. This is the Doberman of the 40s. And saying the Rottweiler, the Collie, the whatever. I'm saying to you, look at this picture. This picture's awesome. You know, if this dog were in my kennel right now, I would be through. How many Malamute people are in here? You'd love to have this puppy? Is this beautiful? This puppy was born in 1927. Okay? This is actually a very interesting picture because it was a composite of two pictures. It was Mrs. Seeley with this Malamute puppy named Lancet, and then this is her Siberian, profession show Siberian Grace. I believe it's Disco and Baldy. And you look at them. You know, they could very well be the same height. But let's look at them. Let's look at the ear set. It's so different. Look at those Siberians straight up. Look at the posterior look on the Siberian, the lighter bone, the dog that's going to be able to move lighter on his feet. Look at the Malamute. As I said, this is a Malamute puppy. But look at the different ear sets. Look at the lovely blocky muzzle, the broader back skull, the heavier bone, the softer expression. I think that tells you so much. These were two different pictures. Friends of mine, Jean Fournier, that many of you know, and Susie Hamilton commissioned an artist to put the two of them together. Anybody here ever been to the Dog Museum? Okay, if you go to the Dog Museum in St. Louis, you walk down the stairs. The bottom of those stairs is this picture. So it's very interesting, and I think just looking at this picture from many years ago teaches you a lot. Susie, let me get him dry. Okay. You want to bring these guys from here? Okay. Can you all see? Just want to set him up, please. That's fine. Is that okay for everybody? Okay, this is a young dog. This dog is here just because when I do seminars, I like to have a dog to touch. Okay? That's why. Okay, when you look at this dog, for example, our standard says you want a dog that is a powerful looking dog. We say that our size, we say 25 inches at the shoulder for male, 23 inches for a bitch. Okay? What we say is when all aspects are equal, everything being equal, the dog closer to the desired freighting size is what we're looking for. Okay, so you're looking for a standard dog. You're looking, will there be a little bit of a range? Yes, there was. Yes, there will be a little bit of a range in size. That's fine. With all things being equal, the dog closest to the desired freighting size is what we're looking for. Okay. We do not give any proportions in our standard. We're looking for pretty much rectangular dog. We don't want a dog that's too long. We say longer than tall. Actually, we should say slightly longer than tall. We don't want a dog that's obviously too short coupled. When we talk about head, we're looking for a broad back skull. We're looking for, we say, about little break. So we have not a lot of stop on our breed as compared to the Siberian. We want a bulky muzzle. We want some depth of muzzle. I think that it's interesting. What happens is, you go to a lot of these seminars and people will say, what's the problem in your breed right now? And it always seems to be the similar problems in every breed. I think in many, many breeds right now we're lacking underjaw. In many breeds, we are lacking underjaw in the Alaskan Malamute. That seems to be one of the problems that we are having. Our standards say dark eyes preferred. Some of you, actually it's kind of interesting, dark eyes preferred is in our judge's book, and it is supposed to be in our standard. We just picked up that in the O2 booklet, the O2 Malamute standards, they left it out. It was a typo. Okay, so any of you who just got the standard recently, that is a mistake. They are reprinting that entire packet because apparently there were problems in more than one breed. Okay, we want an almond shape, obliquely set eye. We want a soft expression. We like the pigment. We are looking for a scissors bite. And actually you will find in your booklet We do have an insert on bite because bite right now is starting to be a little bit of a problem with us. Our standard does not ask us to check for full dentition. We may, at some point, decide that we do want to make a change. That may happen. But until then, we are not checking for missing teeth. We are checking, excuse me, may I finish?
Yeah.
Thank you. We're not checking for missing teeth, we're checking for bite. That is what our standard tells us to do. Yes, ma'am.
There's a lot on the judge's L list
I
right
know
now
that.
about the drop incisors or whatever you want to call it.
You know,
I was wondering if you could comment on how important you think that is.
I don't think it's a big deal, and I'll tell you something interesting, and maybe some people in Malamute have seen it. I haven't seen too much of it, and I was kind of personally surprised. There are a few other breeder judges here. Have you seen much on the dropped incisors? You have?
Yeah,
You have not?
I've seen them, but it doesn't,
A lot?
it seems to, well,
There's no to the bite.
doesn't all
No, I
justify it,
don't
and they're
think
still there. They're about half the
Yeah.
size of normal, so I don't think it's a significant.
No, I don't think it's a significant problem at all. You know, you have a few
But
other
it comes
breeds.
with age.
Well, you know, and this is an interesting point, too. Malamutes can sometimes, you know, often, they're kennel dogs, and sometimes they get a little bit of sense biting every once in a while. And we're not going to tell you that some of them have worn down their teeth, too. You know, and that can happen. Definitely. Okay. We talk about the ears. The ears should be medium size. They should be small in relation to the size of the head. That is important. They should be rounded. They're triangular. They're rounded at the corners. The neck. We want a good, strong neck. And when these dogs pull sled, when they're in harness, and when they're moving, when they move, they're going to move forward. They're going to put that head down. That's what you want to see for a correctly structured animal. You want to see good lay back of shoulder. You want good bone. We're looking for 50-50. We're looking proportion-wise. We're looking from the withers to the elbow to the ground. It should be 50%. We want a well-balanced dog. As I said, we're looking for good length of back. We're looking for a slightly sloping top line. Very often, slightly sloping is actually very slightly. And I will go over this a little bit more also, and you'll address that more in the hands-on today. Sometimes you can't even really tell until you feel for it, just because of the way the coat is. So you really need to talk about that. We will be talking about that in the examination procedure. Okay, that a good, strong top line is important. We're looking for the tail to follow the spine, to come right off the spine. As I said before, we are looking for a waving plume. This is what we want. This is what our standard calls for, a waving plume. We're looking, as we want in all endurance animals, we like a fairly short hop. We want moderate bend of stifle. Coat is extremely, extremely important in this breed. And Nancy will talk to you about that a little bit later. The fact that it's not length that we're concerned about as much as it is quality. We want a harsh coat. We want a good, what we call a woolly undercoat, and that has created a few problems. That because we want a good double coat. When you go up to these dogs, you should be able to feel a good, harsh, textured coat. And it is definitely a survival characteristic. Even now, the Inuits, what do? If they have a long-coated dog, a dog that doesn't have a proper coat, they shoot them. Even now. Because they don't have any place They have no place in their culture, even now, for a dog that is not going to be able to serve its function. And somebody was telling me also that what happens is that these dogs with the long coats will actually freeze right into the ice. And we have, some good slides. I gave you the slide. Nancy and I have integrated our slides, so it should be very interesting. And we have a very, very good slide of a dog that was run on purpose, a long-coated dog, and you can see all the big ice balls. The dog wouldn't make it. There's no way that this dog would make it. I'll just tell you a funny little story. Anybody here ever been to Jerry Prentice, to the Institute? You have the first year that we ever went, okay? I had these wonderful ideas about things that I was going to do, okay? And I wanted to show what correct coat was. So we had this young dog, and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're all excited. We're going to dump a big bucket of water on this dog and see what happens, okay? Never even occurred to me what was going to happen when we dumped this bucket of water on this dog. We all go up, this is a dog. This is summertime, thank God. And there's this big bucket of water. We take the bucket of water, we dump it on the dog. What happened? He shook. He shook. I was standing like this. I'm standing here. I've got this brand new red pink suit on. It was drenched. My stockings were drenched. My shoes were drenched. It was unbelievable. My hair. I looked like I had come out of the shower. The girl who owned the dog was mortified. She gets down on the ground. She's on the ground, crawling around on the ground because it was a tile floor. It had never occurred to us that we should have done it outside. It was a tile floor, so we've now got at least an inch of water on the ground. Okay? She's crawling around with towels, trying to sop up the water. Okay? But you know what? And people are like running away. It's like one of those gallery things, jumping up in the air, running away. But you know what? That dog was dry. That dog was totally dry. I still have judges come up to me even now and say, I remember when you did that, and they said that was the best lesson you ever taught. And I said, yeah, right. It was warm out. It was a disaster. Yes.
I know, I always have questions. I've never seen a long coat. So tell me more about what it looks like so I'll know.
You will see it. I just gave Nancy a slide that I had of a long-coated Malamute, and I'm assuming, which is going to really be a wake-up call. Every once in a while you'll see them in the ring, but they've been trimmed up, so you need to recognize them. And it's one of those things. And you can see when you come up with these slides, you can look at the lines of that dog. Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things for judges to tell. With these long coats, with all this texturizer and everything that's been trimmed, breeder can recognize it across the room. But it's hard. It's hard when it's not your breed. Just like somebody said to me in Danes, I was talking to a judge, Danes, and I said, why didn't you see that was a long coat? She said, did you see that dog that you just put up had a dyed mask? And I went, no. But that's just the way it is. And that's why you need to try to tell, if the dog has been scissored. It's hard. It's really hard. And let's face it, as judges, we don't want to play fools. We're not going to go out on a limb. But there are certain ones, if the dog is really perfect, you'll see, when she shows you these slides. Feet are extremely important on Alaskan Malamute. And we really do want a big, tight foot. We want a big foot. Big, tight foot. And that, as I said, that is really important. Before I go on to judging procedure, how I go over a dog, what we're looking for, what makes our breed a little bit different. And then I just have a couple more slides I wanted to show, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. Does anybody have any questions for anything that I've talked about? Oh, okay. This is a wonderful breed. Those-
Just get her to turn her face this way.
Okay, this is a wonderful breed. Those of us who own them know how wonderful they are. They can be very active. They can be very, very difficult. They have minds of their own. You know, when you judge an Alaska Malamute, when you go into that Malamute ring, please, please clean up the ring. Make sure that ring has no bait in it. Okay? Malamute people, we know two dogs are going to try to kill each other over a piece of liver that you can't see. Right? You know, we have cleaned up our act, and those of you, please join in. We have several Malamute breeders. We have some Malamute judges in here. Please, respond. I think we're doing much better than when I came in this breed 34 years ago. You know, you'd have one grumble, and then all of a sudden, now they're really much better. But, you know, you've got to remember, a Malamute's not going to back down. Consequently, when you judge them, don't try to crowd them all in together. Give them enough room. Please, just give them enough room. Clean up the ring. Could you just turn this dog around so this is how I'm used to going over this?
How tall is he?
I would say this dog is about 24 inches, you think? Yes, this dog is about a 24-inch dog. The dog actually, I went out to get one dog and ended up with another dog walking in. The other dog that was coming in was about a 26-inch dog. So it would have been interesting to have actually have seen the difference. They're both fine. You know, they're both, all things being equal, it's the dog that's closest to the freighting weight. The 26-inch dog was an inch over the 25. This dog's probably a little bit under the 25. You know, you're looking at the attributes, you're looking at how this dog conforms to the standard.
Would you be more, if you had that situation, he doesn't know it. If you had that situation, you had one that was, let's say, 1 inch over, one that's 1 inch under, they were both equal. Would you be more, as a breeder and worrying about size of your breed, would you be more inclined to want to go with the one that was larger?
No.
No?
No. What would I do? I've never had a situation with two dogs being equal.
I know that's hypothetical.
It's absolutely hypothetical. Absolutely. Because when I'm going to get down to the movement, when I'm going to get down to the coat, the bite, the tail, the head, it's not going to happen. Would I go with a larger dog? No, I'm going to go with whatever comes closest to the standard of my breed. And this is something very, very important. We have a good standard. Our parent club, the Alaskan Malamute Club of America, asks you to please judge by our standard. Our standard is important. Our standard is written well. There are very few things that we would like changed. It is extremely important for you to go by our standard. Okay? It's interesting. I've had people, I had a judge once tell me that she was going to look all the way back and if there was one tooth missing on a dog, there was a definite problem. And I said, ma'am, let me tell you something. She said to me, this was interesting, she said to me, she said, I'm the guardian of your breed. I said, no, ma'am, you are not the guardian of my breed. My parent club is the guardian of my breed. And I think every one of you, you think about your own breed. You own your standard. Nobody has the right to tell you what your standard should be. You have a standard. The judge is the guardian of the standard, meaning that the judge should uphold our standard. That is what is extremely important to us. And I think that's the point that really needs to be made.
Excuse me, Wendy.
Yes.
I'm having a tough time seeing that dog is only 24 inches. Where am I at?
I don't have a wicket here. This is probably, how big do you think this dog is?
I put in at least 25.
No.
You don't think so?
Absolutely. I don't know.
It's rough enough. You can just, the coat makes him look like.
You know, the coat, and I mean, this dog doesn't have a lot of coat right now.
Oh, you've never had a dog do that?
Does?
No, that's not.
I mean, this is really not,
That's not what it is.
right, that's not going to work.
No.
That's not going to work, it really isn't. You know, maybe he's a little over 24, but it doesn't matter.
He's not.
It doesn't matter to us. We don't have a disqualification. Okay? We're looking for other things. We're looking for our positive attributes.
So if the dog is a male dog, is a little under 25, that's okay.
We're looking, we have a little bit of a range. It could be a little bit under, it could be a little bit over.
Okay.
As I said, the other dog that I was going to bring in, since it disappeared, was a 26-inch dog. So it would have been interesting for you. And don't forget, we have coats. We have a coat. You know, so sometimes it can be very, very misleading. Okay? When I go over to the breed, I don't talk to them. Don't talk to them. Malamutes can be very excitable. They'll jump up. They can flatten you. You could be on the ground and have this dog walking over your body. You know, I just walk up. I personally ask the handler to show me the bite. That's just the way I do it. Unless I think somebody's going to let go of the dog and then I check the bite myself. I just check for stop. I just check ears. I go down, I check shoulders, top line. Often with this breed, especially as I said, there is going to be range as far as length. You are going to have to check top line. You are going to. Sometimes what happens is the coat is going to come up a little bit right in front of the croup, so the dog will look maybe like he's a little higher in the rear where he really isn't. So you really need to check that. I'll just check testicles, condition. That's it. Please, do not bend. That should have any aggressive tendencies toward people. Sometimes we have had problems with other dogs, but please, if you think there's a problem, please excuse him from the ring. Okay, Karen.
When checking the bite, you just look at the front.
I just look at the front. As I said, our standard, I'm just going to get this because I have one more thing to show.
Also, the ears. How important are your ears?
Ears are very important.
Okay.
You know, as far as what, Karen?
Is, well, the length, the thickness, whether or not they should
Well,
have
that's a
the
nice thick
coat
ear. You know, it's
inside.
funny. It doesn't say it in our standard, and
Right.
in my opinion, it certainly should, because we really do want a thick ear. A
You
thin ear
touch
can
them?
get frostbite.
Do you touch them?
I always do. I always feel for ears.
Okay.
This was the puppy picture of that beautiful puppy. You know, I think, as I said, there's nothing more beautiful than the beautiful waving plume of the Malamute. Okay, Thank you. I
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you very much.
I have a question about procedure. One of the sweepstakes I did in another breed, my rep suggested after I was finished, do not turn facing the same direction as the dog, but continually face toward the rear when checking shoulders, and I found that kind of difficult. Is that what they're teaching now?
What do you mean?
When examining the dog, as you go forward, to never turn around facing the same direction as the dog.
I always back.
Rottweiler seminar that I went to.
I always face.
They taught that because if the dog decided to turn around and nail you, you got bitten in the shoulder, not the face.
Exactly. That's what this particular rep was telling
Well,
me.
I don't know. I
But it's
always
more, to
turn-
me, it's more difficult to feel a shoulder backwards.
And when I go over and I
You should know
judge,
whether or not you
well,
can
we have
get
to,
it.
right. I always keep a hand on the dog, just to let him know I'm there. I check test him. This is very interesting. I just wanted to show this to you. It's a few different colors. But the interesting thing is that's not a dog. That's not a dog. That's a computer imagery. That's 4 different dogs. And, you know, I did it so long ago. I'll tell you the truth, I don't remember which part came from which dog. I don't even remember which the dogs are. But I thought we did a pretty good job. You know, beautiful neck. I think that we're losing neck. We want a beautiful, beautiful neck. I think a beautiful top line. You want that, you know, the head, the neck, the beautiful plume to the tail. I would shorten the hock. I would definitely shorten the hock on this dog. As I said, I want a nice big foot. The dog, actually the other dog, big foot. We don't want much bend and pastern. I think that we had originally, we used to say that we had an almost vertical pastern, and then we changed to slightly sloping. And technically, you know, there shouldn't be very much difference, but unfortunately, I think in some dogs, I think that it went too far. And I think in some of them, we had too much slope, and we're getting a flat foot. We don't want that. We don't want a lot of pastern. We want it because we want a nice, big, tight foot. Really important. Same dog. Notice it's kind of interesting. It's not great. That's what we call the Alaskan. I think that's what we call the little sable. It has the very good glass tipping. And we've now made him into actually a seal dog. And just to talk about color, very briefly, color doesn't matter to us. Color does not matter. You can have black dogs, you can have seal dogs, you can have the all-white dog. They can all do the job. Color doesn't mean anything. And of course, your red dogs are going to have liver pigment. That is fine. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a difference in the texture between the colors?
No.
No.
They shouldn't be. You know, sometimes the jet black dogs will have a little softer coat, but you know what? They shouldn't. They shouldn't. They should be evaluated just like any other.
Can you hear me all right down here? Do I need to use the I'm going to show you just a little bit of video over here because I want to put you into the mood of living in the Arctic. Because what we're going to talk about next are the things that the characteristics of the Malamute that help him to survive in this Arctic environment. This is a film taken in the 1920s of the Inuit Eskimo tribes. This is actually their daily life. So it gives you an idea of the kind of terrain that the dogs had to cover, and so that there were some places where we had they actually were doing weight pulling. There is a weight pull outside tomorrow morning. I'd recommend you go out and watch some of it because I find that weight pulling is very similar to the kind of ice things they had to go across, and then of course they get to another spot. What this is And I'm finding a lot of smaller teeth. We also want to make sure that the dogs have good scissors like. This is a fan hitch which was used in the tundra where there were no trees. Now we're in an area where the dogs are going to need to be localized in order to get across the tundra at a very good speed. So we have a dog who does trot 10 locals for a short distance. He's basically an outdoor dog. He doesn't ever have a dog house, no matter whether it's 50 below zero with 100-mile-an-hour winds. He's got to be able to curl up in a ball and live. That means we have to have a very dense undercoat. We have to have that proper guard coat or this dog can freeze to death. Notice that even though the coat freezes, when these dogs shake, they will be totally dry underneath, like Wendy told you in her story with the water. 1 or 2 shakes, and the water just doesn't go through that proper coat. Now, when the white man came into this country, he changed the method of sledding pretty much. And this is the kind of sleds that were used in the Arctic with heavy loads of freight. There was about 1,600 pounds on that, and they're using it with a 12-dog team. So we're talking 100 pounds or more. This particular team is going up Mount Denali to replenish the cabins in the wintertime, and they're still using them there today because the snowmobiles can't do the job. They can't get through the heavy snow. They also can't carry enough gasoline in order to get up there and back. So they're still using these dogs. This gives you an idea of sometimes not only do they have to go up over these jets of ice, but they also get in very deep snow. But they have to be really pulling hard. And even though this is up and it's maybe, as Mr. Berggraf, these were slides from him in Alaska, he said it was 50 below, and yet you still have running water. And again, our independent nature of our Malamute, their instincts to survive, tell them what's safe and what's not safe. They also have to cross ice. It's absolutely a glare of ice. And again, this is where their big feet give them a lot of traction. Our standard calls for a strong toenail. They have to be able to curl those toenails down and dig into the ice in order to be able to hold a lot of weight in themselves across that kind of ice. And again, even today, they are just staked out in the snow, curl up at night, and they depend on that coat, proper coat, in order to be able to survive. Just kind of going through the whole standard. Things that make this dog capable of surviving. Our standard was not really written by us. The standard for the Alaskan Malamute was written by the Arctic environment. It was the wind, it was the cold, it was the swarms of insects. These were the things that made this dog evolve so that even the tiniest detail might help him to survive over an animal which did not have that tiny detail. Many of these dogs died. In fact, 1 year later after this film was made, the gentleman who made the film went back to the Arctic to do some more filming, and that Eskimo died of starvation. And of course his dogs were probably starved along with him. We're looking for dark pigment on the lips, on the nose, on the eye rims. And the reason for this is I talked to the lady up on Mount Denali who runs the dogs up there, and she said, I don't keep a dog with light pigment anymore. She said if they have pink on the nose, they have pink above the nose or on their eye rims, the swarms of insects tend to attack that pink pigment. Also, she said it sunburns, and they have 24 hours of sunlight in summertime. So she said we have a lot of problems with infection if the dogs have pink pigment. So we're looking for dark pigment. Even on our red dogs, we want as dark a pigment as possible. Now we do allow a snow nose. The snow nose is the light pigment streak that you see down the middle. This comes in almost all dogs in the wintertime. Not all, but a lot of dogs, and all breeds of dogs in the wintertime. This is only a theory, but vitamin D is absorbed by sunlight or by pink pigment easier than it is by dark pigment. So this kind of snow nose should be seen in the wintertime when there would be very little sunlight and there might be a help to absorb the vitamin D. And I did have a Malamute breeder who has a kennel, and he has a whole set of runs on one south side of the kennel and a whole set of runs on the north side. And he said they switch the dogs. Because the dogs on the north side get the snow noses. If they turn around and put them on the south side, their noses get dark. So I kind of think that might be correct. This dog, again, we're looking at a dog with a lot of stop. Our standard says that we should have very little stop. And if you have a lot of stop, or any place on the dog's face where snow might catch and freeze, that would be a disadvantage. If you have a less stop and more of a wedge-shaped head with no, but again, pull the hair back, because lots of times on both on the forehead or on the side, the dog can look like it might have places where the snow would collect, but if you go and put your hands on it, it might be nothing more than hair. You're looking for an almond-shaped eye, an obliquely placed, a protruding eye would be a great fault. And most of these eyes are deeper set. These would all help to protect the eye from flying snow and also from any kind of snow blindness. And this eye is very distinctive, because when it comes to our ears, we like, if you were to draw a line through the eye out, you would come right to the bottom of the ear. That would be the proper answer. If you look at all the Arctic animals, this is an Arctic fox. Look at the dark pigment. Look at the tight lips. That's another thing we look for in our standard is tight lips. Any kind of drooling lip hanging down is going to freeze. Black stop, almond-shaped eye. You'll find that to be true on almost all your Arctic animals, especially Arctic canines. Again, there's the Arctic wolf, little stop, almond-shaped eye, that tight lip, dark pigment. The ears, we want nice, thick, as Wendy said, we want nice, thick ears, very well furred. I might prefer that this ear be a little bit smaller on this dog, but this dog's ears are never going to freeze. Nice thick ears, real heavy fur. And again, properly placed. If you run a line through the eye out to the back of the ear, you'll find it reaches right there. This dog does the same thing. You have the line of the eye goes out to the ear, which is set out and looks like it's standing off from the side of the head. That's a distinguishing characteristic of the Malamute. Notice that the ear is on the back side of the backside edges of the skull and stands off from the head.